In exactly 47 seconds, Donald Trump would discover that the red folder Jasmine Crockett held in her steady hands wasn't just another partisan investigation. It was a constitutional death sentence bearing the official seal of the Department of Justice. The document nestled inside didn't merely recommend permanent disqualification from public service, but employed a term so rarely invoked in American jurisprudence that constitutional scholars would debate its implications for decades. Constitutional life sentence. But first, Trump had to traverse those 47 seconds of manufactured confidence, believing he could performance art his way through yet another witch hunt, unaware he was walking not into a congressional hearing, but into the methodical execution of his political existence. The transformation of room 2154 in the Rayburn House office building had been deliberate and surgical. What typically served as a standard committee chamber had been reconfigured into something that resembled a tribunal more than a hearing room. Surgical LED lights positioned at precisely calculated angles eliminated every shadow that might provide psychological refuge. Each micro-expression would be captured, every bead of perspiration documented in high-definition clarity for historical posterity. The mahogany-paneled walls absorbed sound like acoustic sponges, creating an environment where whispers carried weight and silences pressed against the consciousness of everyone present with the density of liquid mercury. Jasmine had arrived 2 hours before the scheduled proceedings, not out of nervousness, but from the methodical preparation that had defined her prosecutorial career for over 15 years. She tested the acoustics by speaking at various volumes, adjusted her microphone sensitivity, and even verified the camera angles that would capture her delivery of what she knew would become the most consequential moment of her professional life. Her black leather portfolio, not the red Department of Justice folder that would soon dominate headlines, contained a color-coded filing system that had evolved through hundreds of complex federal cases. Blue folders for circumstantial evidence, yellow for corroborative documents, red for smoking guns. Today, the smoking gun was literally wrapped in official red. The atmospheric tension was palpable even before Trump's arrival. Congressional staff members moved with the hushed deficiency of surgical nurses preparing an operating theater. Gallery seats filled with a carefully curated audience, constitutional law professors from Harvard and Yale, investigative journalists whose careers had been built on exposing governmental corruption, and ordinary citizens who had felt democracy trembling beneath their feet for the better part of a decade. Each person present understood they were witnessing something potentially historic, though none could predict the surgical precision with which constitutional justice would be delivered. When Trump entered, his body language immediately established territorial dominance, or attempted to, shoulders squared, arms slightly extended from his sides. He moved through the chamber like a performer taking the stage rather than a citizen responding to constitutional oversight. His expensive cologne mixed with the sterile scent of government-grade paper and the subtle ozone of electronic recording equipment. He selected a seat that positioned him slightly higher than the congressional panel, an unconscious power move that revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of the day's actual power dynamics. Jasmine remained at her assigned position in the semicircular arrangement, not by accident, but by strategic design. Her posture embodied the controlled authority of a federal prosecutor who had never lost a case she was fully prepared to win. Her breathing remained steady, hands folded with mathematical precision, each finger placement calculated to project competence rather than aggression. Behind her, constitutional law experts served as silent sentinels, each specializing in different aspects of the monumental legal framework that was about to be deployed with devastating effect. The chamber's temperature had been maintained at exactly 68 degrees, cold enough to ensure mental alertness, but not so cold as to provide external justification for the trembling that would soon manifest from internal psychological pressure. C-SPAN cameras positioned like electronic predators waited for the moment when theatrical masks would inevitably slip away, revealing the authentic human responses beneath carefully constructed public personas. Microphones sensitive enough to detect breathing patterns would capture every verbal stumble, every unconscious tell, every moment when performance gave way to genuine reaction. Trump's opening gambit followed his established playbook with predictable precision. Here we are again with another partisan witch hunt. Congresswoman Crockett knows she has absolutely nothing, so she's wasting taxpayer money on more political theater. His gestures were expansive, designed for camera consumption. His smile never quite reaching his eyes, but maintained long enough for photographers to capture images that would later contrast dramatically with what was to come. His voice carried the artificial authority of someone accustomed to controlling narratives through volume and repetition rather than substance and evidence. Jasmine's response demonstrated the difference between earned authority and performative dominance. Mr. Trump, do you consider yourself accountable to America's democratic institutions? Or do you believe you operate above constitutional oversight? Her voice remained professionally neutral, stripped of hostility or partisan inflection. This absence of emotional charge made her words exponentially more dangerous, like a surgeon's scalpel that cuts deeper, precisely because it encounters no resistance from surrounding tissue. The first evidence emerged from a blue folder, with the ceremonial precision of a legal document being entered into court record. This FBI analysis, dated 2 months prior to the 2020 election, identifies what federal investigators classify as systematic undermining of democratic processes. The paper rustled softly as she positioned it for camera visibility, each movement deliberate and professional. Trump's initial confidence experienced its first microscopic fracture, visible only to trained observers who understood how psychological pressure manifests in subtle physical adjustments. That's more fake news, Congresswoman. The FBI has been weaponized against me since day one. Everyone knows this. But his posture shifted almost imperceptibly, shoulders less expansive, chin slightly lowered, hands moving from open gestures to more defensive positioning. Perspiration appeared first along his hairline, barely perceptible under professional makeup, but captured mercilessly by the surgical lighting that eliminated every shadow. The audience sensed the atmospheric change, though few could articulate exactly what had shifted in those crucial seconds. Jasmine allowed his deflection to echo through the chamber for exactly the right duration, long enough for its inadequacy to register with observers, but not so long as to appear theatrical. Then she proceeded with the methodical pace of a prosecutor who had never needed to rush because her preparation was so thorough that victory was mathematical rather than emotional. Mr. Trump, deflection tactics don't alter constitutional law. Could you please address the specific question about accountability to democratic institutions? Trump's escalation to intimidation mode followed patterns established over decades of avoiding accountability through aggression. The Congresswoman is clearly out of her depth here. Maybe she should return to Texas and stop wasting America's time with these fishing expeditions. The personal attack was designed to diminish her authority through condescension that carried undertones of both gender and regional dismissal, a strategy that had succeeded in less formal settings, but would prove catastrophically inadequate in this constitutional context. Jasmine's response was strategic silence for exactly 7 seconds, precisely calibrated to allow Trump's words to hang in the air long enough for their inappropriateness to register fully with every observer present. The chamber's acoustics amplified the silence until it became almost physical, pressing against everyone's consciousness with increasing weight. Then, with surgical timing, Mr. Trump, intimidation tactics don't alter constitutional law. Could you please respond to the question about accountability? The second evidence folder, yellow and official, was opened with the same deliberate precision. These transcripts cleared for public disclosure this morning document conversations in which you explicitly discussed overturning results through alternative means. An audio device previously unnoticed, activated with a soft electronic chirp. Trump's own voice filled the chamber for exactly 15 seconds, each word preserved with digital clarity that made denial impossible. We need to find alternative pathways. The results don't reflect what actually happened. We can't let them steal this. The physical manifestation of psychological pressure became impossible to conceal. Drum's hands developed a subtle tremor that he attempted to control by gripping his chair arms, but the leather squeaked betrayingly under the increased pressure. His face flushed deeper beneath the makeup, and perspiration became visible despite professional efforts to control it. That audio is fabricated. Deepfake technology. My legal team will challenge every single word. But his voice carried a new quality. The strain of someone whose carefully constructed reality was encountering irrefutable contradiction. Gallery members exchanged glances that spoke volumes about the shifting power dynamics. Network cameramen instinctively zoomed closer to capture micro-expressions that revealed more than any prepared statement could convey. Even Trump's own advisors appeared uncomfortable, whispering urgently among themselves as they realized their carefully planned damage control strategies were proving inadequate to the surgical precision of Jasmine's methodical destruction of their client's credibility. The constitutional immune system was finally functioning as designed. Trump's desperation manifested in direct character assassination. Jasmine Crockett is a radical congresswoman who wants to destroy America through lawfare. She has no experience with national security issues, doesn't understand how real leadership functions, and is clearly promoted beyond her competence level. The attack was broader and more vicious than his previous attempts, revealing the depth of his psychological discomfort as traditional tactics failed to generate their expected results. Jasmine allowed him to complete his entire statement, demonstrating the confidence of someone whose preparation was so thorough that no personal attack could undermine the constitutional framework she was methodically constructing. Then she reached for the sealed red folder bearing the Department of Justice's official seal, her movements deliberate and ceremonial. Every eye in the chamber focused on that folder as if it were a ticking bomb, which in constitutional terms it precisely was. Mr. Trump, you've mentioned experience and competence. Let's explore that framework. Her voice carried new weight, the authority of someone about to deliver a verdict rather than present evidence. The red folder opened with a sound that seemed disproportionately loud in the sudden silence. Paper against paper, official seals being broken, democracy defending itself through documentation and legal procedure. The third and final piece of evidence emerged like a constitutional dagger. This psychiatric evaluation commissioned by the Department of Justice and completed by a panel of psychiatric experts with appropriate security clearances assessed your fitness for public service. The conclusion employs terminology rarely seen in American constitutional law. The document's official letterhead was visible to cameras, its authenticity unquestionable, its implications devastating. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the chamber's HVAC system seemed to quiet in deference to the moment's gravity. Trump's breathing became visibly rapid and shallow, his hands gripping the chair arm so tightly that his knuckles whitened beneath the skin. Every person present understood that devastation was imminent, but none could predict its exact magnitude or methodology. The report recommends what constitutional scholars term a constitutional life sentence, permanent disqualification from public service based on psychological unfitness, and demonstrated threat to democratic institutions. The paper rustled like a flag being lowered to half-staff, each sound amplified by the chamber's perfect acoustics. This isn't about partisan politics, Mr. Trump. This is about protecting American democracy from documented threats to constitutional order. The power dynamic had reversed completely. Everyone present realized simultaneously that Jasmine wasn't conducting a congressional hearing. She was delivering a constitutional verdict that had already been determined by America's highest legal and psychiatric authorities. Trump's political empire wasn't being attacked. It was being officially pronounced dead with all the ceremony and finality that constitutional law could provide. Jasmine set her final trap with a question that appeared completely safe to answer. Mr. Trump, do you believe that any American citizen operates above constitutional accountability? Or is this a privilege you claim exclusively for yourself? Her voice remained professionally neutral, but every observer understood they were witnessing the setup for a kill shot of unprecedented precision. Trump, desperate to reclaim some semblance of authority, responded with characteristic bombast. I am completely innocent. This is the greatest witch hunt in American history. No one has been treated more unfairly than me. I am the most persecuted politician ever, maybe more than Lincoln. His voice rose with each declaration, performance reaching crescendo levels as he attempted to overwhelm evidence with volume and repetition. Jasmine opened the red folder completely like a surgeon revealing cancerous tissue during a life-saving operation. Mr. Trump, this document isn't about persecution. It's about protection. Protecting American democracy from threats to constitutional order. Each word was chosen for maximum impact, delivered with the precision of someone who understood that history would remember not just what was said, but exactly how it was said. The smoking gun emerged in its full, devastating glory. An official Department of Justice recommendation stating based on comprehensive psychological evaluation, behavioral pattern analysis, and constitutional impact assessment. The subject represents an ongoing and substantial threat to democratic institutions, official recommendation, permanent disqualification from public service, effective immediately upon congressional review and implementation. Jasmine looked directly at Trump, then turned to face the cameras, her voice cutting through the silence like a constitutional laser through diseased tissue. Democracy isn't dying, it's defending itself. 10 words that would reshape American political discourse, delivered not with theatrical flourish, but with the quiet authority of someone speaking an undeniable truth that transcended partisan boundaries. Trump's face underwent a complete transformation over exactly 12 seconds. Each stage was captured in high-definition clarity that would be analyzed frame by frame for decades. Initial confusion lasted 2 seconds, as his mind processed words that didn't fit his prepared responses. Recognition dawned over the next 3 seconds, as the full implications registered. For seconds of desperate searching for escape routes or alternative explanations followed. His eyes darted between advisors, cameras, and documents. The final 3 seconds showed a complete realization of inevitability. His expression settled into something resembling defeat more profound than any electoral loss. His hands stopped trembling, not because he regained control, but because his entire body went completely still in psychological shock. Color drained from his face beneath the makeup, leaving him appearing almost translucent under the surgical lighting. His mouth opened slightly like someone who had forgotten how to breathe properly. Eyes lost focus, staring at the document as if willpower alone might change the words printed on the official government letterhead. For the first time in decades of public appearances, cameras captured the real person beneath the performance. Vulnerable, defeated, constitutionally eliminated. Jasmine maintained steady eye contact throughout the collapse, her professional demeanor never shifting toward satisfaction or cruelty. She had delivered constitutional justice with surgical precision, not personal vendetta. The chamber witnessed not political theater, but actual democracy functioning as the founders designed, methodical, thorough, and ultimately decisive when confronted with genuine threats to constitutional order. The immediate aftermath unfolded like a carefully choreographed constitutional ballet. Trump's legal team immediately huddled in desperate conference, papers shuffling frantically as damage control strategies were hastily improvised. Advisors whispered urgent consultations while their client remained frozen, staring at the document that represented the official end of a political career spanning decades. Network anchors struggled to process the magnitude of what they were witnessing in real time. Their usual talking points rendered obsolete by the unprecedented nature of constitutional accountability actually functioning. The gallery erupted in controlled chaos that somehow maintained the dignity appropriate to the moment's historical significance. Journalists typed frantically on devices. Constitutional law experts exchanged glances of professional amazement, and ordinary citizens sat in stunned silence as they witnessed the American constitutional system actually defending itself. Jasmine remained centered throughout the tumult, professional and composed, allowing the gravity of the moment to speak without unnecessary commentary or theatrical gestures. Within 30 seconds of her 10-word declaration, #constitutional life sentence began trending across every major social media platform. Video clips spread faster than network executives could coordinate their responses. Democracy isn't dying. It's defending itself became an instant rallying cry that transcended partisan boundaries, shared by users who had never agreed on anything political but recognized fundamental truth when they heard it delivered with such precision. TikTok creators immediately began remixing the audio over various visual backgrounds. American flags, historical footage of constitutional conventions, images of democratic institutions. Twitter exploded with constitutional law analysis threads as legal scholars worldwide attempted to contextualize the constitutional life sentence concept within historical precedent. Reddit communities dedicated entire mega-threads to frame-by-frame analysis of Trump's psychological collapse, with users identifying specific microexpressions that revealed the exact moments when different aspects of his constructed reality crumbled. The cultural impact was immediate and profound. Late-night television hosts cleared their scheduled material to address the moment's significance. Constitutional law professors across the country assigned viewing of the hearing as required coursework, recognizing that their students were witnessing democracy's immune system functioning in ways that textbooks could only theorize. International media covered the event as America's constitutional immune system finally activating, with analysis focusing on how democratic institutions could defend themselves when properly functioning. But the true power of Jasmine's achievement extended far beyond viral moments and media coverage. She had demonstrated that earned authority built through years of preparation, constitutional study, and unwavering commitment to democratic principles could successfully confront inherited power based on performance and manipulation. Her victory wasn't personal. It was systemic, proving that American institutions could function as designed when staffed by people who understood their responsibility to constitutional order rather than partisan advantage. As the hearing officially concluded, Trump remained seated for several additional minutes, apparently unable to process the finality of what had occurred. His advisors eventually guided him from the chamber, but the damage was constitutional and permanent. The life sentence terminology would become the new standard for addressing threats to democratic institutions, establishing legal precedent for protecting constitutional order from individuals deemed psychologically unfit for public service. Jasmine gathered her documents with the same methodical precision that had characterized her entire presentation. The Red Department of Justice folder went back into her portfolio, its contents having served their historic purpose. She had entered the chamber as a congresswoman. She would leave as the person who proved that American democracy possessed the tools necessary for self-defense when wielded by hands steady enough to use them properly. The weeks following the hearing saw unprecedented constitutional scholarship as legal experts debated the implications of the constitutional life sentence concept. Universities organized symposiums, law journals dedicated special issues to the topic, and the Supreme Court issued statements acknowledging the constitutional validity of permanent disqualification based on psychological unfitness, combined with demonstrated threats to democratic institutions. Trump's political career wasn't just ended. It was officially declared incompatible with constitutional governance and preserved in legal precedent for future protection of democratic order. Trump's attempts at political resurrection were met with constitutional barriers that proved insurmountable. Campaign finance regulations refused contributions to someone officially disqualified from public service. State election boards rejected ballot access applications based on the federal constitutional determination. Media platforms began treating his political statements as entertainment rather than legitimate political discourse, fundamentally altering his relationship with public attention and influence. The psychological evaluation that formed the cornerstone of Jasmine's case had been conducted over months by a panel of the nation's most respected psychiatric experts, each holding appropriate security clearances and specializing in the intersection of mental health and public service fitness. Their conclusion was devastating in its clinical precision. Subject demonstrates pathological inability to distinguish between personal interests and constitutional responsibilities, combined with narcissistic tendencies severe enough to constitute ongoing threat to democratic governance structures. The evaluation documented patterns of behavior that constitutional scholars had theorized about but never seen implemented in legal proceedings. The constitutional life sentence represented a new category of civic death not criminal punishment, but protective quarantine of democratic institutions from individuals psychologically incapable of serving them faithfully. Trump became the first American to receive this designation, but legal experts predicted it would become crucial precedent for future protection of constitutional order. Jasmine's methodology became required study for prosecutors and constitutional lawyers nationwide. Her combination of meticulous preparation, professional demeanor, and surgical precision in evidence presentation demonstrated how constitutional accountability could function when properly executed. Law schools developed entire courses around her technique, studying how she maintained moral authority while delivering devastating legal consequences. The international response was equally profound. Democratic nations worldwide studied the hearing as an example of constitutional self-defense, with several countries adapting similar fitness for democratic service evaluations into their own legal frameworks. Jasmine received invitations to address parliamentary bodies across Europe, constitutional conventions in emerging democracies, and academic institutions studying the intersection of psychology and governance. Trump's business empire, built on the foundation of political access and influence, began crumbling as the constitutional disqualification removed his primary source of leverage. Partners distanced themselves from someone officially declared unfit for public service. International deals collapsed as foreign governments recognized that his promises carried no constitutional weight. The man who had built an identity around winning faced the ultimate irrevocable loss: constitutional irrelevance. But perhaps the most significant outcome was the restoration of faith in American institutions among citizens who had watched democracy seemingly defenseless against authoritarian manipulation. Jasmine's victory proved that the system contained antibodies capable of neutralizing existential threats when activated by people with sufficient skill, preparation, and moral clarity. Democracy hadn't just survived. It had actively defended itself through constitutional mechanisms that most Americans didn't know existed. The hearings footage became archived as historical document, studied by future generations as the moment when American democracy proved it possessed the tools necessary for self-preservation. Children would learn about constitutional accountability through Jasmine's example, understanding that democracy requires active defense by citizens willing to master its mechanisms and deploy them with precision when threats emerge. Years later, constitutional scholars would identify the moment as a turning point in American democratic evolution, when theoretical constitutional protections became practical tools for preserving democratic order. The constitutional life sentence established precedent that no individual, regardless of wealth, influence, or popular support, could operate above the fundamental requirements of psychological fitness for democratic service. Jasmine Crockett had entered that chamber carrying the weight of American constitutional tradition. She emerged, having proved that tradition contained everything necessary to protect itself from those who would destroy it from within. Her 10 words, "Democracy isn't dying, it's defending itself," became the rallying cry of a constitutional renaissance, proving that earned authority, methodical preparation, and unwavering commitment to democratic principles could triumph over any threat to American constitutional order. In the end, Trump's constitutional life sentence represented more than the destruction of one political career. It demonstrated that American democracy possessed sophisticated immune responses capable of identifying, isolating, and neutralizing threats to constitutional governance. The founders' vision of institutional self-defense had finally found expression through a congresswoman who understood that democracy's greatest strength lay not in tolerance of its enemies, but in the precise, methodical elimination of those psychologically unfit to serve its principles. The chamber emptied slowly, each observer understanding they had witnessed history being made through constitutional mechanisms most had never imagined could function with such devastating effectiveness. Democracy hadn't just survived another assault. It had evolved, strengthened, and demonstrated that properly functioning institutions could protect themselves from any threat, no matter how powerful or persistent. Jasmine Crockett had proved that American constitutional order, when properly defended, was not just resilient, but actively protective of its own survival and the citizens it was designed to serve. I could end it here, But what's really going to stay with you is in the next video. It's on your screen now, and honestly, it's the best thing you'll watch this week.